Good morning. It's Pop again, Dennis Murray. Today is our eighth Popcast, and its title is Giving Thanks. It seems to me that an important part of trying to make uh, use of our experience of awe is to give thanks for all our gifts, the gift of life and the gift of each other uh, in particular. But there are some other things which we had thought, which we have not seen as gifts, which I think are gifts, and we will talk about those in a moment. My starting point is that it's appropriate to give thanks, and that the very best way to give thanks uh, is to use the gifts which we've been given in uh, and in so doing, our thanks is genuine and soulful, heartfelt, and appreciated. Now, bear in mind, as we were discussing yesterday, it's possible that reality is some kind of impersonal creative goodness, or it could be a creative person, a divine person who's created the world. So we don't really know what reality is. So we all make a personal choice about that. But while it might seem easy to thank the Creator as a way of giving thanks, um, all religions include the idea that if you're not practicing, uh, then your words are empty. And so the gift giving by how you live is well called for, whether under any circumstances, however you see reality, and whether or not you personify awe. My point is that I want to stress that the only sincere thanks is a lived thanks. And uh, but I want to talk about some of these things which we had not seen as gifts, which in fact we had seen as curses, and which had, in some ways, made us uh, worried about whether our appreciation of the awe as was wrong. We we'd like to think that these four things that I'm going to talk about, death, hate, the necessity to provide for yourself, and unfairness, um, we want to, we don't, we wonder how could these things be in a world where some creative goodness is in charge? And it makes us worried about whether we've read the world wrong and creative goodness is not in charge. Or maybe there's also an evil force that exists and that causes these things to exist. It's always been a concern for humans, and various attempts have been made to deal with them. Essentially, in the West, the the great religions of the West settled the question by saying that um, they were our fault, that God originally created the world. Without these things in it, there was no death, there was no hate, and there was no necessity to work, and there was no unfairness. And then we failed to follow a direction that was given about the eating from the fruit of the tree of good and evil. And as a result, these things were added to the world as a fair punishment by a loving, creative God who wanted to be obeyed. And that worked for a very long time as a brilliant explanation of how these things are in the world, and yet the world is fully in the hands of a very powerful, creative God, who's also very good. And the problem, with modern times is science has been able to show that um, the story told about them being our fault just can't work because death was in the world before there were humans. And it appears that hate, at least in some forms and some species uh, uh, of other primates, chimpanzees seem to be the principal candidates. The hate was in the world before there were humans as well. Um, Uncertainty, unfairness seems to be built into the world, um, but it seems to have long pre-existed our existence, and the necessity to provide for yourself it began with the beginning of life, billions of years before humans were born. Um, the smallest little creature has to wiggle through the mud and open its mouth in order to take nourishment. It doesn't fall off a tree into your mouth with no effort by yourself. And so that created a problem because we really invested in the story. And the the way I came to learn about it as a child was that it was extremely upsetting to my parents and my teachers that the power of this simple story had been lost. Uh, you know, due to science, principally Darwin, but in general due to other scientific support of Darwin. And so my parents reluctantly came to accept what was the position that, well, the details of the story were wrong, um, but the idea that there's a creative God, a creator God, still was solid in their minds and hearts, and that we've been given life and each other and expected to live appropriately survives. And uh, I agree. Um, Most people seem to agree. But I want to talk about whether these things really are curses. My point of view is they're gifts. Now, I've already talked 8 minutes, so I've got 2 minutes to tell you about why they're gifts. Death. How could that possibly be a gift? Are you kidding me? I'll tell you what, why don't you keep your gift? Thanks very much. You've been too generous already. Just, let somebody else have that one. I don't want all the toys. But it is a gift because we only learn by comparing and contrasting, and death is the unfortunate contrast to life. If we didn't see that we have to die and we didn't see people around us dying, we wouldn't have any way of knowing how precious life is. And our whole psychology starts from this incredible gratitude for our own existence, which leads us to experience the awe and leads us to each other and leads us to the rich fullness of human life. We wouldn't have that. We wouldn't be humans without the contrast that death provides to life. And hate. We talked a couple of days ago about hate. If there weren't a real choice to turn towards each other or turn against each other, then the choice would have no moral value. We'd be, if we were all compelled to turn towards each other, if the call was so compelling we couldn't refuse it, then we wouldn't have any moral credit to claim for the decision to turn towards each other. Um, it wouldn't happen. So it's a gift because it gives us the chance to be participants in the life of the awe. We get to choose to live the awe as to live use our gifts as part of living the awe, and including the gift of each other by turning towards each other. So it makes us a participant in, it gives moral value and meaning to our lives. And um, as far as necessity goes, this is complicated and we need to make it tomorrow's subject because I'm running out of time. But the gist of it is necessity leads us more to each other because we get more, we're able to provide for our necessities better by working in conjunction with each other. There are a number of reasons that I'll talk about tomorrow in some detail as to why this is the case. They're built into our psychology, and but they're very effective. Necessity leads us towards each other, and hence is a gift. And then the final matter of unfairness. This is a tough one. It's going to need another whole podcast. But essentially, unfairness allows us to see how much we care about each other. Because while the universe seems to allow all manner of things to happen and seems to be, if you will, somewhat uncaring, um, nonetheless, all of this, we care a lot about this unfairness, and it teaches us how much we care for each other, that it breaks our heart to see unfairness fall on somebody else. And so, enough for today. We'll explore more tomorrow. Take care. Bye bye.